Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa and today we're going to be doing the May reading wrap up. So grab a beverage and let's get into it. Okay, so for the month of May, I participated in a total of 3 different readathons. The May the Force Read With You readathon hosted by Break Even Books, the Desertathon hosted by Esme from Bookish Buddies, and the 48-hour book uplathon hosted by Becca from Becca and the Books. So for the month, I have my reading journal here and I want to give you some quick stats. So I tried to read a total of 10 books, however I only finished 8. I read a total of 2,978 pages. I read middle grade, young adult, and adult books for this month. And for the genres, I read some fantasy, mystery thriller, and a sci-fi. For the formats, I read a total of 4 physical books, 3 graphic novels, 1 audiobook, and 2 of those were a mix of audio and physical. Okay, so I'm not going to break any of these down according to readathons. I'm just going to go through the complete list as there is a lot here and I have some thoughts. So I wanted to start with the 2 that I did not finish. And the first one of those was Delphine and the Silver Needle by Alyssa Moon. This is a middle grade where we follow one of the mice from Cinderella. This was a cute book. I made it about 50 to 60% in and I decided to DNF it. I was reading this for one of the readathons and I just wasn't having a good time with it. It's not a bad book and I'm not going to completely DNF this book. I may put it back up on the shelf and try to read it again at a later date. The plot for me just wasn't... There just wasn't enough substance, and it, like I said, it could have just been that I was not ready to read this book. So like I said, I got about 50 to 60 pages in and I decided to put this one aside. The other one that I did not finish was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, and only because I only got 15 pages in, I ran out of time before the end of the month. So I still do want to read this. This is one of my books that I'm really wanting to read soon. It'll be my first novel by Joe Abercrombie and I've heard a lot of good things and I want to see if this is an author that I enjoy. So you will be seeing this on a future TBR. Alright, so for the next one I read Rat Queens Volume 1. I really enjoyed this. We follow I think like 4 or 5. Let's see. Hannah the Rockabilly, who is an elven mage, Violet the hipster dwarven fighter, Dee the atheist human cleric, and Betty the hippie smidgen thief. The characters in this book are so sarcastic, humorous, funny, badass. I loved this series. I can't wait to finish it. I just loved the humor. The art style is great. Yes, really enjoyed this. I think I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I find it hard to rate graphic novels. I need to come up with a better system. But yes, really enjoyed Rat Queens. The next book I read is currently my top favorite book of the year so far, which is saying something considering how much I love and obsessed with the Bloodsworn Saga by John Gwynne. However, Empire the Vampire by J. Kristoff is my first book by J. Kristoff adult. I should mention that because I have read the Aurora Cycle, which is a YA series that he co-wrote with Amy Kaufman, which I will be talking about later in this video. However, this is my first J. Kristoff adult novel, and you guys, this book is everything. I've always enjoyed vampire and werewolf stories, but with the Twilight craze and all those other ones, I kind of got away from it. I don't know if you could say just burnt out. But the world and the way that J. Kristoff writes vampirism and the rules in this book, if you want to call them rules, were just phenomenal. This is one of those few books, at least for me, that I was hooked by the writing style from the very first pages. The aesthetic in this is just everything. The vibes. I can't even articulate how much I loved this book. The characters, the plot, the world building, the descriptions. Yeah. This is one of my new favorites. I devoured this book, even though it is quite the chunker. It only took me a couple days to get through, and then only because I had a lot of interruptions. But I highly, highly, highly recommend this book to anyone that does enjoy fantasy, vampirism, any of that. Just a great, great book. Again, the world building in this is just so atmospheric. You get transported into this world. You can feel the emotions. You can feel the desolation of the land. So we follow Gabriel, who is the last Silver Saint. The humans have lost the war against the vampires, and you're listening to Gabriel tell his story, going through all his struggles of how he got into becoming a Silver Saint, the training, the battles, the relationships that he cultivates throughout his life. And this is definitely an anti-hero story. You got some morally gray characters. Some of the decisions that Gabriel made I might not have liked or agreed with, but I understood why they were made, and I just highly, highly recommend this book to anyone and everyone. Please go read this book. The next book was The Corpse Queen by Heather Herman. This is a YA mystery, maybe could consider horror. I'm not sure. I loved this book. If you have read and enjoyed Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, you will love this book. We follow Molly Green, yes, who is in an orphanage. She gets taken to her aunt's home, who she doesn't believe is her aunt because she doesn't believe she has any family, and she becomes a grave robber. And we follow her as she is learning about this world, who her aunt really is. And the twist at the end of this was something I was not expecting, and I also wasn't expecting how atmospheric this one was as well. You really feel the age of women being considered as only having one place in the world, which is, to cook, clean, keep the house, and have babies. Molly wants to be a doctor of sorts, and she finds it difficult to try to put herself in a man's world and be accepted and approved as a actual doctor. Very good story. I really like this for a YA. It had some darker parts to it. The emotions in this were very well written, and I just thoroughly enjoyed this book. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. And it missed the 5-star mark simply because the pacing seemed to be a little off. So the story opens where she's in the orphanage and she's traveling to her aunt's home, and then you kind of hit a lull where it's just kind of a repeat of everything, and then it's boom, 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 everything's happening all at once, and it was wrapped up just a little bit too neatly for me, but otherwise, overall, a very good story. The next book I read was Aurora Burning by Amy Coffin and Jay Kristoff. This is the second book in the Aurora Cycle trilogy. I was very anxious to get back into this world. I gave the first book in this series, I think, 5 stars. This one was a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed this one almost as much as the first one. The plot for me got a little bit muddy towards the middle of the book. It just seemed to be a lot going on. Now that could be simply because I just wasn't keeping up with it. But I loved being back in this world and being back a part of Squad 312. And I'm trying to think what Zila. The character in the first one, she rarely talks. And she almost comes across to me like being robotic. Not that she is, but she's just very black and white, very articulate, and only thinks scientifically, doesn't seem to have emotions. We see her character arc expand, and even she's not understanding the beginning of feeling emotions again, and that was one part that was really impressed upon me in this book. I really enjoyed it. We got to see more of Aurora and her relationships with the other members in her squad. We also learn a little bit more about Cal. Very, very good. I cannot wait to read Aurora's End, which is the third and final book in this series. The next book I read was The Legacy by Adrienne Young. This is a YA, I guess you could call it dystopian or fantasy. This is set in the world of her other books, Fable and Namesake. We are back in Bastion, and we are learning more about the Roth family. We are following, I forget what her name is, Bryn, where she goes and meets the Roths officially, which are part of her family, but she was raised by her aunt in a different city, and she is going to this family to find her place. The Roths are a family where each one has their own place, their own job to do for the family, and we follow Bryn as she comes into her own and sets her own destiny, as opposed to just being what the Roths expected her to be. The emotions that she has in here are very real, very strongly felt, and written in a very good way. I didn't feel like there was anything repetitive. I gave this a 4 out of 5 only because I really didn't like the ending. This is kind of like a standalone. Well, I shouldn't say it is. It is a standalone. And I almost felt like we were kind of left with a lot of questions unanswered, and we don't really find out what she finally becomes or finally does. And I suppose, you know, some people like that kind of ending in a book. Me, however, I gotta know it all. The next book I read was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. As you know, if you watch any of my videos, I don't read a lot of other genres other than fantasy, and mystery thrillers are probably close to the bottom of the list. However, Simone St. James has sold me on thrillers. I will read anything that she writes. This one is a dual timeline where we are following a story that happened back in the 60s, I believe. No, 70s, and then we are fast forwarding to 2017. And if you like true crime, this has a very good true crime element to it. The paranormal aspect that is in this book was one that I was not expecting, and when I did realize that it was paranormal in the beginning, I was kind of like, you know, is this gonna be something for me? I was hooked. The atmosphere that is created by the author in this is so creepy. I read this at night, and there were some parts where I just had to close the book because I don't get creeped out, and this one kind of gave me the itchy vibes, you know, the hair standing on the back of your neck and is somebody watching you kind of feeling. So very, very good. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the way that it was wrapped up in the end. It leaves you with a very creepy atmospheric vibe, and I just loved this book. All right, the last two I have for you that I read in the month of May are both graphic novels, and the first one is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This is a middle grade. We follow Nimona, who wants to be a villain. So she talks Lord Blackheart into allowing her to be his apprentice. And she's hilarious. She is your, I'm bad and I know it and I want to be bad. And Lord Blackheart follows the rules of the villains in this world, and she doesn't understand that. In her mind, we're villains. We're supposed to be bad. We're not supposed to follow the rules. But Lord Blackheart has a little bit different ideas on that. So we follow these two as they attempt to take over the world of sorts, and it was cute, but the way it ended, disappointing. I gave this a 3 out of 5, and it's probably a very low 3. There were too many questions left unanswered. The story just kind of like ends and drops you off in this place of where you have more questions than you did in the beginning of the book. But very cute, good for middle grade age, I suppose, but this one just didn't quite hit it for me. The last graphic novel that I read is actually a reread, and that is Fangs. Fangs? What the hell am I saying? The last book I read is a reread, and that is Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This is the cutest graphic novel I've ever read in my entire life. I will probably read this once or twice a year. I think the first time I read this was in November of last year. We follow basically a love story between a vampire and a werewolf, and the cute little play on words that you have in here just crack me up. So like, for example, so there's one where, this right here, if it'll focus, she gives him a kiss, and then she's like vomiting or throwing up, and he's asking her what's wrong, and she's still puking. He goes, "Oh, I ate garlic." I mean, it's very dry, funny, just random humor, and it's such an endearing story. I just get a kick out of it. It's only 100 pages, so it's something that you can read in just a few minutes. I mean, the art style is very minimal, and even the jokes of sorts are very close, but it is such an adorable little story and one of my favorite graphic novels. Alright, you guys, I think that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Maybe some of my reviewing or thoughts gave you some ideas of books you would like to read in the future. If you have read any of these, let me know what you thought of them. I am hoping, upon hope, that going forward I can articulate my words better. I always feel like when I'm reviewing books that speaking it is so much harder than writing it. I write reviews quite a bit, and I find it a lot easier to write, so maybe I need to start scripting. Either way, if you like this video, please give it a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!